After 4 days on cold church steps, an incredible cowboy uncovered a surprising path to hope. Jake sat huddled on the ancient worn steps of the little church, each breath visible in the chilled air that seeped deep into his bones. The wide expanse of empty land stretched behind him. Once his pride, the modest ranch his family struggled to maintain, now sat forgotten, much like his dreams. It staggered him that a job at the local feed store had meant so much, yet it had been stripped away by a force he couldn't fight. He used to be a fearless cowboy, but now he felt like a shadow of himself, caught in a grip of uncertainty. As the first light of dawn spread its fingers over the plains, illuminating the familiar sights, he felt a burst of warmth, momentary hope mingled with desperation. These plains had always whispered to him of possibility. Now they were a reminder of what he stood to lose. Each night on those steps was colder than the last, holding the reminder that he couldn't return to the ranch until he figured things out. The land that nurtured him was slipping through his fingers. Would he give in to the pressure and take a job that might pay well but swallow him whole? A shout pierced the morning stillness, and Jake looked up to see a group of children barreling towards him, kicking a soccer ball in reckless abandon. Their giggles floated like music, drawing him in. Unknowingly, they held dreams of their own, astronauts, veterinarians, teachers, and his heart swelled as they bombarded him with curious questions about life on a ranch. What's the best horse? Can you ride bareback? Do you have cows? That innocent curiosity ignited a spark within him. For days he had felt like a ghost, but here were children full of life, chasing after ambition. He began sharing stories, weaving life lessons from years of work, the dangers of the land and the value of determination. And as he spoke, a part of him that he thought had died began to awaken. Still, he was pulled between two opposing forces, his longing for a stable future and the desire to help these kids dream bigger than themselves. Before he could get lost in the warmth of camaraderie, reality crashed into his thoughts like a dark cloud. The wealthy developer had shown up in town, eyes set on acquiring the place where the children played. Jake felt a weight in his gut, each tick of the clock reminding him of what could soon be lost. How could he let those kids down? But what if he stood to lose everything he had left? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from.
I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The fear clawed at him, twisting tighter around his chest. Just a week from now, the meeting at the church would happen, his possible future entangled with an impossible choice. Fight for the land and the hopes of children, or secure his own path forward. Could a struggling cowboy shoulder the weight of their future? He felt the children's laughter echo in his mind, and the thought flickered in his heart. Perhaps somewhere in that simple joy, he would find the answer he desperately sought. Underneath that haunting Texas sky, Jake's mind raced with choices, each one leading him closer to an inevitable confrontation. Would he rise for them, or would he turn and run? The stars began to twinkle one by one, and as night deepened, so did his resolve to decide. He knew that the struggle between safety and sacrifice was just beginning. Jake awoke the next morning, a sense of urgency pricking at his consciousness like the sharp Texas breeze. Each thought raced ahead, churning aggressively. The sun crested the horizon, casting shadows that danced like specters haunting him from the corners of his past. He couldn't shake the feeling that this was the pivotal moment, the time to reassess who he was against what he could become. Gripping the rough-hewn railing of the church steps, he closed his eyes, allowing the light to warm his face, despite the lingering chill. Memories surged within him, a childhood filled with relentless exploration, wild horses, and long sun-drenched days that blurred into one another. In those youthful moments, he had been adventurous, never afraid to tackle the impossible. A flicker of that spirited boy began to reignite a sense of purpose. But purpose alone wouldn't be enough. The questions continued to throb in his mind. How could he reclaim his former self? Could the remnants of his old life give him the foundation for a new path? The stakes were higher now than ever, not just for him, but also for the kids whose laughter reverberated in his thoughts, echoing a promise of hope that felt both fragile and electrifying. Suddenly it hit him. These children needed someone who could guide them, someone unburdened by fear. He recalled his father's words, "The land talks to you if you listen." It made sense now. Those words were not just about crops or cattle, but about life itself. Jake decided he would integrate that principle into his plans.
If the children saw him stand firm, then perhaps they would learn the value of resilience. And if he could rally their spirits, he might ignite a movement, however small, to save their playground from the developers' clutches. But where would he begin? He envisioned a gathering, an informal meeting of sorts, where he could inspire the children and their families. He would share the stories of courage from his youth, intertwining them with calls to action. As ideas crystallized, adrenaline surged through him.
In doing so, he would carve a path, not just for himself, but also for the community woven into those dusty trails. With determination fueling his next steps, Jake picked himself up from the church steps. He sauntered into town, figuring out his approach with each passing stride. His heart raced vehemently at the thought of those anguished faces losing what little hope they had. Should he confront the townsfolk first? Engaging the rich developer could be perilous, but he had witnessed enough greed and deception. Perhaps it was time for a reckoning. As he approached the local diner, the cacophony of clinking dishes and conversation enveloped him. The smell of breakfast wafted enticingly, but his mind drifted far from food. Instead, it filled with strategies, narratives, and the need for connection. He was here to inspire, not just to survive. He needed to convince others to believe in a cause, to unite behind a common goal. Jake centered himself, preparing for whatever conversations unfolded. Finding his footing might come with unexpected challenges, but one thing was certain. Something was shifting within him, urging him forward. Today would not just be another day. It would mark the dawn of his transformation. He would either rise to meet the challenges ahead or risk losing everything he loved. As he stepped through the diner's doors, the mix of hope and apprehension turned into certainty. And then he saw her, Allison, the fiery schoolteacher whose passion for the children had always struck him as fierce and unwavering. Their eyes locked, and in that moment, Jake sensed that if there was anyone who could help him rally the others, it was her. The time had come to face not only the developers, but his own daunting fears. He approached her table, ready to lay the groundwork for something much larger than either of them had ever imagined. Would she stand with him, or would she turn away? The answer could determine everything. Jake stood at Allison's table, heart pounding, words coiling in his mind like a rattlesnake ready to strike. She looked up, her eyes a melange of surprise and curiosity, and for a moment, the clamor of the diner faded, leaving just the two of them in a suspended reality. Allison, he began, the name feeling heavy yet invigorating on his tongue. I need your help. The playground. The kids deserve that space, and I have a plan. Her expression shifted, cautious yet intrigued, a glimmer of recognition mixing with a frown. As he sat down across from her, Jake felt the familiar weight of self-doubt threaten to crush his resolution. What if she dismissed his ideas? What if she didn't believe in him? But then he recalled the laughter of the children, their carefree joy igniting a flicker of determination. He had to push past the fear that had kept him silent for too long. All they have is that playground, he continued, his voice edging on urgency. It's not just wood and swings, it's their sanctuary. And if we don't fight for it, we're letting someone take away their joy. I want to organize something. Speak to the parents, the kids, the whole town. Allison's brow furrowed deeper. Jake, you know it won't be easy. The developers have deep pockets and connections. We can't just waltz in and expect them to listen to us. Her voice, though cautious, held remnants of a challenge. But that's just it, isn't it? Jake leaned forward, pushing the chair back slightly. The diner's bustling background dulled into a hum, leaving only the fervor of his conviction. We can't just wait for them to move in and bulldoze our hopes. If we can show them how important this place is to the children, maybe they'll reconsider. Maybe the whole town will rally behind us. For a fleeting moment, Jake contemplated the severity of his words. The very essence of his childhood was woven into that playground. The idyllic days spent climbing trees, racing friends, and dreaming under the sun were threatened by greed masquerading as progress. It wasn't just the kids. It was an indictment of the very values he was trying to reclaim. Allison opened her mouth to respond, but hesitated, turning her gaze down, contemplating his proposition. Sensing her conflict, Jake seized the moment. You've always cared deeply about these kids, he pressed, keenly aware that he needed her unyielding spirit alongside him. You've inspired them in the classroom. What would you do if you thought they could lose that innocence? We could inspire them beyond the walls, encourage them to understand their worth. She looked up, her fiery passion bubbling to the surface. What do you mean? If we can gather their stories, the moments that matter in that playground, and present that to the town, we can shift the dialogue. Show them our community values more than profit. The heartbeat of his vision surged with fervor. If even a handful of families stand with us, it could spark a movement.
History shows that many have stood against the odds and won. We just need the right strategy. Allison's eyes sparkled with unresolved ambition, the tension between skepticism and hope palpable in the air. Jake's pulse quickened. Maybe he could inspire not just the children, but also an entire town willing to fight for their loyalties. The idea of rallying people who shared his vision electrified him. "Okay, Jake," she finally said, a slow smile breaking through the uncertainty. "Let's hear your strategy, but we'll need more than just idealism." As he launched into his ideas, he felt himself shedding the layers of doubt that had encased him for years. He was stepping into a role he had scarcely imagined possible, a leader combating not just a developer, but his own fear of failure. But even in this moment of clarity, a chill of foreboding lingered in the back of his mind. What could truly come from confronting established power? Would they push back harder than he anticipated?
Jake could sense that they were at the beginning of something profound, and yet questions loomed larger than answers. How much was he willing to lose to make a stand? With every realization came the weight of all that was at stake, converging on his next steps. As Jake navigated the precarious balance between hope and reality, one fact became clear. They were entering a battle where consequences would not just reshape a playground, but also define who he was ready to become. A developer's position was tenuous. Their ambitions had yet to encounter the fierce spirit of those they threatened. Jake's journey had only just begun, and this time he wouldn't go into the fray alone. Would it be enough, or were they merely preparing for a clash that would leave them shattered? Jake's voice spilled over the bewildered silence of the diner, spilling forth his vision for the playground with fervor. Beneath the table, his foot tapped nervously, a sign of the turbulent thoughts swirling in his head. Allison's cautious nod reassured him, yet a vestige of doubt wormed its way into his mind. Could he really inspire others to care as deeply as he did? "Let's break it down," she suggested, leaning back as she pulled a napkin closer, ready to jot down ideas. "We need to understand exactly what we're fighting for and why it matters. The kids' experiences, those stories, how can we gather them?" A suggestion bounced around in his mind. Maybe we can have informal gatherings at the playground. Let the kids, their families, reminisce about their favorite memories there. We could record them, maybe even turn it into a small presentation. Allison nodded, enthusiasm beginning to bloom. That could work. It may resonate with the community, especially if we can find a compelling angle. Jake's heart raced. They were forming an action plan. How had he gone from merely envisioning a better playground to strategizing ways to protect it? This feeling, the pulse of purpose, reshaped his sense of identity in real time. What had once felt like an insurmountable wall now appeared to be a series of stepping stones. What if we also include a visual component, maybe create a community art piece using input from the kids? Jake proposed, his words gaining momentum. It could symbolize the playground's significance, forging a connection between the kids' happiness and what's at stake. "Yes," Allison exclaimed, her eyes glistening with inspiration. "We could even invite a few local artists to help. Perhaps we can fund it through a small fundraiser. Art always has a story." Imagining the busy, laughter-filled afternoons at the playground, Jake felt a burgeoning sense of hope. But amidst that hope, shadows of doubt crept in. Would parents join in? Would they resonate with his story about loss and joy? Every idea forged felt like a fragile thread tethering him to a larger reality, a reality he needed to carefully weave together to show others. But the threat was immense. Developers often wielded their influence like a sledgehammer. Deep down, he questioned if his fragile resolve could withstand the force of corporate interests. "What do we do when they push back?" Jake asked, speaking more to himself than to Allison, the tremor in his voice betraying his uncertainty. "Then we push back harder," she replied, conviction layering her tone. "But we need to be smart. We should prepare for the backlash that could come. If our plan gains traction, they'll likely escalate their efforts to undermine us." As her words settled into his mind, Jake felt both the weight and the thrill of the challenge ahead. It dawned on him that this moment was far more than just a fight for a playground. It was a test of his character. Allison leaned in, her voice dropping to an intimate whisper. "Look, Jake, this isn't just about the kids. This is about finding your voice. You have a knack for inspiring others. Maybe it's time for you to believe it too." Her words ignited a flicker of realization in him. Could the real battle lay not just against external forces but within himself? What opportunities to grow as a leader emerged if he embraced the fight? Jake looked around the diner, then back at Allison, determination solidifying. I know what I want now. I refuse to allow fear to dictate the narrative. If we frame this as a community issue, humanizing the value of the playground, we can build an alliance, one that makes it harder for them to ignore us. Each breath sharpened his focus, painting a clearer picture of his purpose and the leader he had the potential to become. He wasn't merely a bystander. He could instigate change, even if it meant stepping into uncomfortable arenas. As they finalized their logistical plans, determination blossomed within him, mingling with visceral anxiety. He felt the pull of both excitement and trepidation, knowing they stood on the cusp of something significant. Yet in that triumphal moment, another thought burrowed deep. Was mere determination sufficient? In the coming confrontation with power, how would he articulate his convictions when faced with opposition? The time had come to articulate those beliefs, to ready himself for the storm ahead. Would he rise to the occasion, or be swept along in its currents? The answers loomed just beyond the horizon, tantalizingly close, but how much resolve would it truly take to uncover them? The first rays of dawn spilled into his bedroom, seeping around the curtains and illuminating the walls adorned with sketches he had made over the years. They were dreams, ideas captured in graphite, a world where creativity bridged divides, where joy was as simple as a swing ride at the playground. But today, that innocence felt challenged. Jake turned, taking a deep breath as the weight of his ambition pressed down on his chest. He had spent the night revisiting their plans, gatherings, recordings, art, and yet lingering doubts about the execution gnawed at him.
Did he have what it took to lead? He traced thoughts back to Allison's words. This is about finding your voice. Could he face the consequences of such bold intentions? His phone buzzed, snapping him from uncertainty. A reminder for the first community meeting would kick off that evening at the local community center. Up until now, it had been a concept, an idea that felt as intangible as dreams. Now, it had become a living entity, sprawling, hesitant, yet demanding. Overwhelmed, he began mentally organizing his thoughts. Jake stood to prepare for the day, shoving aside insecurities with each movement. He needed a script, words strong enough to command attention, yet vulnerable enough to elicit empathy. While he at least understood the mission, he found himself questioning if he truly understood how to convey the stakes at hand. He brewed coffee, each slow drip emphasizing the ticking clock. Just over 12 hours remained until the community gathered, and he would be standing before them, addressing their concerns, pleading for their hearts to entwine with his vision. What did he really want from this meeting? As he sat down with his cup, he felt that old familiar fear creep in, threatening to drown out his purpose. The developers were a powerful group. Their resources stretched far beyond his limited reach. Would people listen to him when they could easily herd corporate promises? The pressure closed in around him, knocking against his resolve. The morning passed in a flurry of preparation. Jake retraced his steps through town, visiting the playground and letting memories wash over him. He watched little kids dart around, their unrestrained laughter filling the air like wind chimes. He let their glee ripple through him, fueling his growing desire to protect that vitality. Yet within that joy, an undercurrent of uncertainty assured him that not all moments would feel like this. There would be voices to oppose him. He was ready to confront them. When he arrived at the community center, a sense of urgency anchored him. People were milling about, familiar faces existing along the spectrum of support or ambivalence. He spotted Allison setting up the projector, her fingertips dancing over buttons and cables. A comfort washed over him, knowing he wouldn't be alone in this. "Jake," she called out, her voice cutting through the white noise of chatter. She flashed a smile, one he used to see as mere encouragement, but now appeared an emblem of camaraderie. "You're ready, right?" "Sure," he replied, though his heart thundered loud enough for him to question his conviction. As the hall began to fill, Jake stepped aside for a moment, collecting his thoughts. He watched as small conversations formed, eyes exchanging glances of skepticism and curiosity. Their apprehensions hung in the air, and he felt distinctly like an outsider. Did he belong here?
Looking back to Allison, he noticed her engaged with the audience, inviting them to share what the playground meant to them. Each tale seemed to unfold an intricate tapestry of experiences that he wished to claw onto for the night ahead. But even as he soaked in their memories, he battled an internal storm that threatened to drown his voice. Eventually, he needed to take the leap. He approached the microphone, summoning steel into his voice and allowing himself to resonate with their fears, the same fears that clung to him as tightly as his own. Drawing a deep breath, he initiated the first words of what he intended to convey. Would his resolve radiate confidence, or would it shatter under the scrutiny of their gazes? Each second that ticked by felt like an eternity, building tension. Yet Jake realized something vital in that pause. This moment was as much a test of his capacity to inspire as it was a test of faith. To them, he was just a guy with a notion, an everyday man up against an imposing structure. Would his ordinary intentions matter when juxtaposed against the relentless tide of development? As he began, a singular thought crystallized. What if this was less about pleading and more about believing? And then, unexpectedly, a voice from the back interrupted him, demanding answers. The familiar face of a well-known community skeptic emerged, its frame casting a shadow across his moment of conviction. The time had come to face. Jake mentally grappled with both dread and determination, aware that whatever followed could either break him or ignite the fire he so desperately needed. Jake locked eyes with the skeptic, a man he knew well from various town meetings. Charlie, loud and relentless, was less an adversary and more a thorn in the side of every ambitious initiative. The disbelief radiating from him served as both challenge and invitation. It caught Jake off guard, quickening his pulse. Are you really going to sit here and pretend this patch of dirt means something? Charlie's tone sliced through the air, each word dripping with doubt and sarcasm. Do you honestly think some swings and slides are going to change anything? It's just playground talk, isn't it? Jake's heart thudded against his ribs. He felt a mix of embarrassment and anger, but he forced the emotion down, exhaling slowly. This was it, the moment that could break him or push him into deeper resolve. He had prepared for questions, but this was more personal, an outright dismissal of his passion. Actually, Jake began, finding his footing amidst the chaos of thoughts swirling in his mind. It's more than just a playground. It's about creating a space where our kids can laugh, play, and maybe even grow into their own voices. He steadied himself, drawing strength from the very essence of his mission. This project is about protecting a part of our community that too often gets ignored.
As he spoke, he noticed a few heads nodding in the audience, small gestures of support that ignited a spark of energy in him. Trust a community of kids to draw joy out of anything, Charlie scoffed, his tone mocking. But they'll never be able to stop developers who see dollars over dreams. Do you think your little speech is going to put a stop to that? The audience began murmuring, a mix of curiosity and skepticism, but Jake found a rhythm in the exchange. He responded, not just to Charlie, but to everyone, his voice growing stronger as a fire ignited within. You're right, Charlie. We can't make big changes alone. We need to hold each other accountable. But what I'm asking for is an investment in trust, not just in concrete and lumber, but in each other. With each word, he felt the air shift. The crowd's focus narrowed on him as their defensiveness softened. He saw faces lighten, curiosity replace skepticism. This was more than a conversation. It was a journey towards vulnerability. Here, he was not just a leader. He was unearthing his own courage. And yes, I'm asking this community to help stand together, whether it's to stop a development or to make our voices heard. He gestured implicitly towards Charlie. But I can't do it alone. The truth is, if we share in this vision, we can make a real difference. Today, not just for our kids, but for all of us. In that moment, Jake felt something awaken. It wasn't merely about the project anymore. It was about confronting his own fears of inadequacy and the urge to be heard. That realization fortified him, pushing through the doubts with a potent clarity. But what will it cost us, Jake? Charlie challenged again, his tone more subdued yet still skeptical. The direct confrontation was a pivot. The air now crackled with challenge and possibility. Possibly everything, Jake acknowledged, his voice calm. But if we stay silent, we risk losing more than just this swing set. The realization dawned on him. The fear that once immobilized him was morphing into a source of creation. With every word he articulated, he discovered an unexpected talent for rallying, for blending conviction with empathy. It was a startling revelation that began to raise the stakes. Let's stop allowing our laughter to echo unheard in our own backyards. Let's find a way to funnel those voices into something that matters, he urged, desperation woven through his determination. As the murmur grew again, Jake realized he had begun to transform from the quiet dreamer in the shadows into a central figure of this discourse. But amid the validation still clung a shadow of uncertainty. Was he ready for the backlash? Did he have the stamina to withstand opposing forces? The crowd moved restlessly, unsure yet intrigued, and as Charlie's face contorted into something resembling contemplation, Jake felt a rush of power. Perhaps this was the beginning of a turning point, but success hinged on maintaining the momentum.
How do we make our voices heard? A young woman asked from the back, breaking through layers of tension and abruptly shifting the energy. Jake's resolve crystallized. "Let's plan together," he replied, now finding urgency in his voice. "Let's build not just swings, but a movement, a collective voice that demands respect." The hall reverberated with a mixture of anxious anticipation and veiled hope. But Jake realized he would navigate the storm that lay ahead, fueled by their hearts entwining once more around that singular vision. Yet just as he felt the tide turning, footsteps echoed behind him, and another familiar face entered the room, a representative from the very development firm they sought to oppose. The tension snapped back into focus, and Jake's resolve was put to the test once again. Was he ready to confront this new reality head-on? Would his words withstand the pressure of the very forces he was trying to resist? As he stood there, a frisson of fear and excitement coursed through him, signaling the journey had only just begun. The representative from the development firm strode confidently into the room, his tailored suit a stark contrast to Jake's worn jeans and unbuttoned flannel shirt. As the man surveyed the crowd, a palpable wave of apprehension rippled through the audience. Jake felt each pair of eyes shift away from him, anticipating what this newcomer might say. The earlier spark of courage flickered, a reminder of how quickly the wind could change. "Ladies and gentlemen," the representative began, his voice smooth and persuasive, "I appreciate your passion for this community. We all want what's best for our children, but the reality is that we also need progress and development." His smile was disarming, yet there was an undercurrent of authority that Jake's skin pricked. Jake's heart raced. He had just tasted a fleeting moment of potential. Now it was slipping away. He clenched his fists, steadying his breath and wresting back control of his thoughts. He couldn't let Charlie's skepticism or this newcomer's polished rhetoric extinguish his resolve. He reminded himself that this was more than playground equipment or development plans. It was about identity and purpose. "Progress often comes at a cost," the representative continued, his tone shifting to one of caution. "You can and should voice your concerns, but consider what might happen without this project. Reduced funding for schools, fewer opportunities for jobs. I urge you to think about the bigger picture." Jake's insides churned as he processed the representative's words. Was it possible to privilege the present needs of the kids without sacrificing their future? He realized that fear was common ground, an emotional anvil that bound many in their decisions. He would need to navigate that fear with unshakable empathy.
"While I appreciate your perspective," Jake challenged, stepping forward, "what we're asking for isn't merely a piece of land, but the soul of this community. We want our children to thrive, not just physically, but emotionally." His voice rang clear, trying to retain firmness without escalation. Progress should never mean neglecting the dreams we have for them. He noticed some in the crowd nodding again, but they were lingering expressions of doubt, caught between hope and apprehension. Feeling the need to anchor their collective hope, Jake knew he had to connect with them now. We need parks, yes, but what we really need is a place for our kids to build connections, to grow with confidence, not just compete for resources. That is paramount. As Jake continued speaking, the atmosphere in the room transformed. It was shifting from sheer opposition to consideration, but uncertainty still loomed large. What if his words were still too soft, easily unraveled by the polished rhetoric standing before him? As he confronted his own doubts, he sensed a deeper truth emerging. His journey was not just to articulate a vision, but to embody the spirit of resilience this community required. Suddenly, an idea ignited. We could host a town hall, open to all voices, parents, kids, stakeholders, all of us. Boldly, he cast the vision into the air, believing in its power to unite. Let's lay out the facts, the needs, the hopes, formulate a plan together that encompasses both growth and care. The adrenaline coursed through him as anticipation swelled in the room. Would they rally? Could he not only revive the initial excitement, but also reshape the narrative towards something they all valued? Jake felt his earlier apprehension dissolved into a resolve to lead, to forge an agreement that blended ambition with compassion. What happens if they push back, he thought, a familiar shadow of concern creeping back into his mind. But he banished it. Instead, he steeled himself for the inevitable challenges that lay ahead. The fear he faced was a tool, perhaps, a sign that he was pushing beyond his comfort zone, an awakening step toward growth. Just then, a gruff voice broke through the discussion. Who's paying for this dream? It cut through the enthusiasm like a knife, and Jake felt the charge in the air shift once more. Another challenge. But as Jake prepared to respond, he realized this was precisely the kind of scrutiny he had to embrace. Suddenly, he understood what lay beneath the surface of his passion. The struggle was not just for the playground, but a defense of ideals that shaped who he was becoming. Ahead of him was not merely a debate. It was a crucible of transformation, where fear could be met with courage and conviction. Jake tightened his hold on that conviction, ready to confront the truth of not just what they could achieve, but who they could become together. And as the crowd braced for his answer, he sensed a shift.
The real battle was no longer just defending an idea, but a test of his emerging authority. How far was he willing to go to uphold it? As he opened his mouth to speak, Jake felt the weight of expectation press against him, a moment constructing a path toward an entirely new direction. Would he seize it or crumble under the gravity of the impending challenges? Jake's throat tightened as he steadied himself, grappling with the sharp edge of the question. The representative maintained a confident facade, but Jake noticed a flicker of unease beneath his polished veneer. For a moment, the air hung heavy with the tension between expectation and anxiety. "Who's going to fund this?" he echoed, trying to map the challenge into something concrete. "That's a fair question, but here's the reality. We can either invest in a temporary solution, or we can sow the seeds for lasting change." A murmur rippled through the audience. He continued, eyes darting among his neighbors, some hopeful, others skeptical. "This is not about financial gains, it's about investing in our future. Every dollar spent here is an investment in our children's happiness, their well-being, their potential." As he spoke, Jake felt a rare clarity washing over him. Each word crystallized his resolve. He envisioned the tangible outcomes, children laughing in the parks he was fighting for, their parents smiling with relief. The mental image bolstered his delivery, allowing him to confront the reality of the situation with renewed vigor. "And yes, we need funding," he elaborated, drawing on what he knew. "But we also need a voice, a community gathering to harness our collective strength. We must ask ourselves, what are we willing to give up to prioritize what truly matters?" The representative frowned, his smile faltering slightly. Sensing a shift, Jake endeavored to take hold of the reins of the dialogue. "I'm not here to offer grand promises. I'm here to gather our hopes and dreams and turn them into a plan we can own together." With every sentence, he felt the weight of expectation shifting, as if the very fabric of his community was beginning to mend. A woman in the audience raised her hand. "But how will we sustain this? What if we cannot afford it long term?" Her voice trembled with the same fears that had clawed at Jake's own heart just moments before. He nodded, acknowledging her concern, remembering the nights spent ruminating over solutions that often felt just out of reach. "I hear you. We all do. That's why I propose an open meeting, a roundtable where every voice contributes. We can discuss grants, local businesses willing to help, perhaps even crowdfunding." The energy in the room shifted again. Skepticism mingled with the palpable spark of collaboration. Jake's heart raced as he recognized how his initially hesitant approach was transforming. This was about unity. More than just him articulating a vision, it was about igniting a collective resolve. Yet, as excitement mingled with uncertainty, Jake's mind spun as he mentally tucked away obstacles he hadn't fully considered. What if the developers pressed harder, or if parents expressed skepticism? The representative smirked, his confidence reinstated briefly, but that only fueled Jake's determination. He understood now that this was only the beginning of what could become a turbulence of challenges. He glanced at Charlie, who had thus far remained distant. In that moment, Jake sensed an ally rather than an obstacle, a light of possibility reflecting the internal struggle through which the entire community was traversing. They were all in this together, and understanding how to carry that weight was essential. "With your help," Jake said, voice steady, "we'll outline a clear and actionable path that addresses your doubts. I will not back down until every concern is met with transparency and respect." A soft swell of agreement moved through the crowd. But just as he felt momentum building, a memory pulled at him. His father's resignation when faced with challenges he thought insurmountable. Would he follow that same path? Something deep within stirred, a restless need to confront any setbacks head-on with clarity and intention. In that moment, Jake recognized the intensity of the journey ahead. It would require more than just words. It would demand vulnerability, courage, and the willingness to confront every hard truth that emerged. The weight of expectation felt heavy once more, but now it was coupled with an exhilarating invitation. Who would he become in this defining moment? He turned to the audience, heart pounding with conviction. "Let's meet next week and bring not just your questions, but also your ideas. Together, we will map out a vision where both growth and community care coexist." As he embraced the lingering silence, filled with a hesitant promise, Jake understood this was merely the start, not just of their shared dialogue, but of his transformative journey into leadership. But then a voice from the back piped up. But what if the developers refuse to compromise? Jake's heart sank momentarily, the gravity of that question anchoring his resolve. He had prepared for many obstacles, yet the specter of that confrontation loomed larger than ever. And so, with a new gravity, he recognized his next challenge, not just to rally the community, but to prepare himself for a reckoning with powers that could undermine everything he had begun to build. Would he be ready when the time came to face them? Jake left the meeting hall, tension swirling in his gut. The dimming sunlight cast shadows along the cracked pavement as he walked, his mind racing. The shout from the back of the room echoed relentlessly, replaying every doubt and anxiety he had tried to suppress. What if the developers refused to compromise? It was a question that rattled him, forcing him to confront an intimidating reality he could no longer ignore.
He wondered how to prepare for the resistance ahead. Strategic planning, he realized, could no longer be an abstract concept. It had to transform into tangible action. In this moment of doubt, pieces of his father's struggle came back, tales of battles lost, dreams deferred. The fear of surrendering to fate knotted in his stomach. He didn't want to replicate that resignation. Instead, he wanted to build something resilient, something that fought back. Jake settled onto the worn steps of the church, the sun dipping low, painting the sky in vivid hues of orange and purple. As he sat there, he pulled out his notebook, a battered journal filled with ideas, sketches, and half-formed thoughts. It had served him faithfully throughout this journey, a mirror of his contemplative process. The challenge ahead felt overwhelming, and as he scribbled lists of potential solutions, the rhythm of his pen provided an anchor amidst the chaos swirling in his mind. Identify the stakes, list possible allies, investigate funding sources, anticipate opposition. He hesitated at that last point. What if the developers had tactics that would undermine his efforts? His hand shook slightly, and he paused, pausing to breathe deeply as he fought the urge to be swept away by fear. The sharpness of his surroundings, acoustic echoes of children playing nearby, the mingled smells of tacos and fried foods from the vendor down the street, snapped him out of his spiraling thoughts. What did he want for this neighborhood? True, deep-rooted change started here, not in a blueprint or financial report, but within the hearts of its people. As he sought clarity in this haze of doubt, a realization broke through. The strength of community was a formidable force in itself. He felt it, a flicker of conviction igniting within. It was clear that he needed to galvanize support, demonstrate the urgency of the cause, and unleash a shared vision that would resonate with the people. The question shifted slightly now, from external obstacles to internal resolve. He had to become the leader he was meant to be, one who could articulate not just the challenges, but also the possibilities. As darkness creeped in, he carefully closed his notebook. Committing these thoughts to paper had steered him toward clarity. The adrenaline of uncertainty began transforming into a fierce determination. In the solitude of the steps, Jake passed through the threshold of doubt into a realm of possibilities. But a cloud of anxiety still loomed, a threat waiting to unfold in the days ahead. He needed to confront those complicating questions directly, to anticipate the tactics of his opposition rather than only reacting to them. Were there ways to understand the developer strategies, their corporate maneuvers? What if he reached out to insiders who might share insights? Standing up, he glanced around, a surge of energy bolstering his resolve. This moment was pivotal. He felt it deep within.
He wasn't confronting just developers. He was challenging the very perception of how investment could manifest in this community. The later hour accentuated Jake's isolation as he took a deep breath and walked down the steps. Each stride forward marked a commitment. No more second-guessing or hesitations. The true test lay ahead. In that flickering tension, he had unearthed the flicker of hope. It was time to act. With determination spiraling inside him, he knew that the next steps required more than just courage. They demanded a strategy. If he was truly to forge this path, he needed allies, trusted advocates. But who could help him navigate this murky terrain? The glimmer of realization ignited his ambition once more. It was time to venture into the heart of those who wielded influence, to confront the developers themselves, and to lay down a foundation for a dialogue that could redefine the future of his community. Would he be brave enough to face them head-on? As anticipation overshadowed fear, Jake prepared to plunge into the next chapter of this uncertain journey. The sun hung low in the Texas sky, casting long shadows across the vacant lot where the old playground stood, still a battleground of sentiments and ambitions.
Jake had never imagined how transformative this struggle would be for him, but as he stood there, heart steady and mind focused, clarity surged through him like the warm winds sweeping across the plains. Jake had spent hours preparing for the confrontation with the development firm. He reached out to community leaders and parents, gathering stories that illuminated the playground's significance, a nexus of childhood dreams, laughter, and community bonding. He meticulously crafted a presentation that highlighted not just the recreational value of the space, but its deeper implications for mental health, childhood development, and community spirit. When the day of the meeting arrived, he walked into the town hall with a sense of purpose that had eluded him for so long. Faces from the community filed in, and he could see the mixture of apprehension and hope mirroring his own. This time, he wasn't just a lost cowboy on cold steps. He stood ready to assert himself, embodying the very resilience he wished to inspire in others. He took a deep breath as he faced a panel that included the developers, a polished group who viewed the land through the lens of profit margins. Yet Jake felt a power rising within him. He approached the podium, knowing he carried not only his own dreams, but the aspirations of the entire community. "Thank you for gathering here today," he began, his voice steady. "We are here not just to fight for a playground, but for the very essence of our community. This space is where children form friendships, where they learn about resilience, joy, and the value of unity. And while I understand the importance of progress, true growth comes from investing in our people, not just concrete structures."
As he spoke, there was no trembling hesitance. He articulated the stories collected. Anecdotes of kids learning to ride their first bikes, friends sharing secrets on swings, and a young girl who found her courage to speak after countless hours of play. Each story painted a colorful picture that reached the hearts of those listening, not just the developers. Murmurs of assent reverberated through the crowd, affirmation building like a wave. But the representative from the firm, now more serious, leaned forward. "We appreciate your sentiment, Jake, but you have to understand we have financial backers demanding results. Can you guarantee us that your version of this community's interests is sustainable?" Jake paused, the question hanging in the air like an unwelcome specter, challenging him. "What I can guarantee is that this community's spirit is worth investing in. We can create a fund driven by local businesses, crowdfunding efforts, and grants. Money that not only protects this playground, but strengthens our community ties." He could see the shift, the uncertainty in the developers' eyes, as community members offered resonating cheers and claps of support. Jake seized this moment. "I invite you to partner with us. Let's marry your vision of progress with our yearning for genuine connection." The developers exchanged glances, and the atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. Jake sensed the tide turning. He had become more than a mere participant in this struggle. He was asserting his voice while embodying the values of those who believed in him. As the meeting concluded, the developers expressed willingness to consider a compromise that could include community input in their plans. Jake's heart soared as the cheers erupted around him, ringing with the voice of a united community that refused to settle for complacency. Walking out of the hall, Jake was no longer the unsure cowboy sitting on cold steps. He stood as an advocate, a community leader. The doubts that once crippled him now transformed into an unwavering conviction that success was possible, tangible, and within their reach. He had fought against fear and forged connections that anchored the future of the children he so deeply cared for. He reflected on his journey. He had been a man searching for purpose, battling uncertainty, and now he emerged as a beacon of collective resilience, the kind of leader his father would have been proud of. With newfound confidence, he would set up further gatherings to maintain momentum, assuring the community remained involved as plans developed. Jake glanced at the playground, now illuminated with possibilities rather than darkness. Each swing caught the light, inviting children to dream once more. He realized he was finally where he belonged, weaving together hope, community, and the undeniable principle that they were stronger together.
This was the moment he had fought for, and he was ready to take on whatever challenges lay ahead with open arms and an unwavering spirit. Now, as you reflect on Jake's journey and his incredible transformation from uncertainty to resilient leadership, you need to subscribe now to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. This is the moment to show your support. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and share in the journey of personal growth. I want to hear from you. Comment your reactions and theories about this ending.
Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Let's spread this spirit of overcoming together.